The debate and discussion section will commence freely as long as you are orderly. I believe that Leibniz team should start, and as long as it's civil, you should be able to discuss freely.
So, Mr. Kubnak, I believe you said something about a children's textbook for learning calculus. And
That's what you like to refer yourself as.
I'm a child, I'm still 17. I'm not an adult yet.
And he's got a law degree, he's impressive.
I'm comparable to Leibniz himself. No, nobody is actually. However, your textbook example only justifies the fact that Leibniz created the integration and calculus before Newton and published it first, and he needed the time to publish it because children's textbooks are ordered in the simplest way for children to understand. That's why derivatives came first, because you need to learn the easiest steps first to get to the hardest parts. You understand that? So, because the integration came after, it's clearly showing how much harder it is to integrate than it is to derive. And I think that's a very good example of why it took the extra 10 years for Leibniz to publish his work. But you had a question towards Leibniz about how come it took him 20 years to publish after Newton, but Newton published 50 years after Leibniz? So why did it take you 50 while it took him 10? Nobody knows.
I'd just like to raise a few more points, if I may.
Can we answer that one first?
Oh, yes, please. Take your time.
They're thinking of excuses. Liars.
So, my client and I have just discussed, and your last question of many was why it took us so long to publish. Now, we don't have a copy of it with us, Principia, but we do have a picture of the cover somewhere. Wonderful, Principia. As you can see, this was published in 1687, which was in between my client's completion of his research on calculus and his publication of it in Methods of Fluxions. As you can see, Principia is much more well known, and he thought of it as much more important to the universe that he get that out there before he completely published his method of fluxion.
Excuse me, are you saying that the Principia is more well known than calculus?
Yes, I am. The 3 laws of gravity and I'm sorry, 3 laws of motion and law of gravitation is in there. Mr. Newton, if you'd like to continue.
Also, you pointed out that before, talking about the children's textbook, how it was easier for you to understand integration by learning derivatives. So how did you figure it out so fast in your 10 years? Was it easier for you by stealing my work? That's all I have to say.
The other thing I'd like to point out is that you both actually, according to you, came up with derivatives and integration totally separate, and you published them together. So if you're saying that it took you so long to start with integration and finish with derivatives, and it took my client here shorter to start with derivatives and finish with integration, wouldn't this be a better method?
Well, we don't actually know when your client finished with calculus since it didn't publish until the 17th century. So when can you say that you definitively discovered calculus?
Well, I published it with my physics because I didn't want to just concentrate on that.
Yes, but that date was after the date that I published. Is that correct?
The fact is that the date is afterwards, but the real fact underneath that is that I invented it first and that he published it first.
In response to what Mr. Kubnak said to me, I actually never said that it was easier to find integration through derivatives.
Yes, you did.
No, I did not. I said that it's easier. No, I said it's easier to learn derivatives first and then learn integration. Also, you said that Leibniz came through integration first and then derivatives. And when you do an integral problem, you're finding the original equation from a derivative, are you not?
Correct.
Yes.
He didn't figure out how to put it the other way. He didn't figure out how to go back to derivatives. My client discovered that first, and then he sent it to him in a letter, which he used.
You don't know how much I used it.
You don't know if he used it at all. Did he tuck it away under a stack of letters? Do you have proof that my client looked at this letter?
No, we do not.
The only solid
However,
proof we
we do
have
know
is
that it
our
was sent.
publication dates.
Also,
That's the only solid
We
proof
do know that it was sent to him.
Why would you send a letter containing all of this work of yours?
Well, actually, we were good buddies until he stole my work.
And if you see, it was from letter from Newton to Oldenburg, who forwarded it to Leibniz.
To be forwarded to Leibniz. That is a direct instruction, I assume, from the sender.
Well, we do not have
Which would be
exact
just-
evidence, ample
You do not have exact evidence of your own letter, sir. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct.
You do not have
That is
evidence of your... I would just like to finish our remarks by saying, as the son of a copyright lawyer, intellectual property is extremely tricky, but without a patent, it's very hard to tell who can buy it first.
It was a bad idea to stand there.
The defense rests. You may ask us questions if you have.
He's saying that there's no proof that he used the letter. There's also no proof that we started and discovered the process where it came from.
Sorry. I got excited.
All right, you each will have 1 more minute to make your closing remarks, and then we'll make.
So, if you will, this argument has basically come down to whether my client did start thinking about calculus, whether my client did start thinking about calculus in 1664 to 1667 when the Great Plague hit London. Now, as you just said, there's no proof that you actually read the letters, but there's also no proof that he didn't start thinking about calculus at that point in time. So it's really a question of whose word to believe. And if I might say so myself, Mr. Newton lived his entire life locked up doing alchemy, physics, and chemistry, while you were out as a self-proclaimed lady killer. So my question is, whose word would you rather believe? A scientist that's well published, or a simple, not simple, an educated man of Germany who has only had one really key discovery in his life, and that is, of course, as he claims, calculus, but it really isn't true.
At least he's honest.
I'm not asking you guys to trust our word. I'm just asking you to look at the good, solid facts and the evidence, which is I published before Newton, and he had access to my publications, and I also sent letters. So the fact is, the fact that I published it first shows you that my calculus is more legitimate than yours.
I believe Mr. Brady had one final word.
Mr. Dalton.
That too.
My name is Mr. Dalton. I had one thing to say. Our notation, as we mentioned before, our notation that we use in today's calculus is all of Leibniz's, and some may argue that notation isn't everything. Notation is just some notation, and you should focus on fundamental theorems rather than just notation. However, the fundamental theorem of calculus was written by Leibniz himself. So I don't really understand how you can argue anything other than Leibniz created calculus and the fundamental theorems and the notation and everything that we have here. Every date says that it was in our favor, that Leibniz created it first. We can only go with his word that he
He
created it
published
first.
it first.
He published it first, that means he created it first.
That's not
That's
true
not
at
true.
all.
That's not true.
Do you have evidence saying not?
Well, yeah, we showed you letters, we showed you my method of collection.
You showed us letters that we may have never even seen before.
Letters from 1676.
After the publication date.
No, that was
Oh,
before
no,
the publication
before
date, but after we started
Case
searching it.
Sorry. Sorry.
Are you guys done?
I believe we are.
Both sides are finished? Okay. Mrs. Crilly and I will now leave the room for a minute to discuss our answer. If we disagree on who is guilty here, then we will get a third party member from the audience to be the tiebreaker. Back very shortly.
So who do you guys think won?
That's a vote.
You lost.
Unfortunately, Ms. Crilly and I were unable to we are going to need a third party. Mr. Raymer.
That's unfair, Jens. That's a.
I come to every football game.
Yeah.
I grill at every football game.
I used to play an instrument.
Dr. Khan, am I really responsible for this? Do I have to pick?
Sure. They are great, Sarah.
Does the losing team get zeros? Is that
Can't you just say they both won? I'm not one to do that, but they both did.
Clearly someone didn't. We won't be mad.
We won't be mad, but we
won't
please
be
ask
mad.
you to use full hard evidence, the evidence that we have presented.
Argument's over.
Come on, buddy. Can I consult a colleague?
I'll allow it.
You may use it. Guys, we should stand. That's how trials work at the very end. I would know, because I watch TV.
Go TV.
Go TV.
I mean, Judge Judy does standing the whole time.
Law and order, everybody stands every time anything happens.
I'm about 365 years old.
Yeah.